Welcome to the Tuesday, August 8th, 2023 regular closed session meeting of the EBMUD Board of Directors. Roll call, Madam Secretary.
Director Chan is coming to the dais. Director Coleman.
Present.
Director Linney.
Yes.
Director McIntosh.
Here.
Director Patterson.
Present.
Director Young.
I'm here.
President Katz.
Here. If members of the public are online and wish to make public comment, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. Comments on non-agenda items will be heard at the beginning of the meeting. Comments on agenda items will be heard when the item is up for consideration, which now would be the appropriate time to make a public comment. Madam Secretary, are there any hands online for public comment?
I have one hand at the moment for public comment. I believe this is George Cleveland.
Please go ahead, Mr. Cleveland.
Thank you, President Katz. Good morning to the rest of the board and Clifford and everyone else who's in the room. I'm speaking to you in my role as the president of the Reigning Pride Affinity Group. Just wanted to let you know that I'm about to send an approved email district-wide, letting folks know that Oakland Pride is having its annual vendor fair and parade on Sunday, September 10th. District has a booth at this fair, and there's plans to have a contingent marching in the parade. So our group is looking for people who want to do both. And I'm going to send out email and for that, and there are some contact people on the email to sign up, and hopefully we will have a good district turnout at this event on Sunday, September 10th. And the people who are in the email, they will provide all the details about how long the shifts are, if you can work a shift in the booth, and whether you can march in the parade, and so on and so forth. And I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention now. Thank you.
And I'll take this opportunity to say, unfortunately, that I will not be able to attend this year's festivities because I will be out of the country. So I hope some of our other board members will decide to participate.
You like saying out of the country.
Out of the country, yes.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Are there any further speakers online?
There are no other hands online for public comment.
Okay. We have, I will take them in the stack that they were presented to me. So I see Director Susan Peters.
So give me one moment.
That one is labeled for Zoom, so
Right.
that person is not raising their hand.
President,
Yes.
Director Peters is one of my directors at Amarillo Water Agency, so I'm here in person. She couldn't make that in person, but she would like to comment by Zoom, but if I could proceed her, that would be great.
That would be fine. Did you already submit a speaker card or?
Yes.
Yeah, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Larry McKinney. I'm the general manager of the Amador Water Agency. And one of your closed session items today relates to discussions that the Amador Water Agency is having with your staff regarding potential transfers of conserved water. And I wanted to offer some brief comments for context going into your discussion. And my director, Susan Peters, would like to comment as well about the importance of that issue for us. We're working hard with your staff to reach a reasonable understanding for a pilot transfer and then a long-term transfer of conserved water. AWA has a contract with PG&E to provide a firm yield from its pre-1914 rights, which have always been used to serve the Amador water system, which is the part of our system that serves the urbanized part of our service area. We believe that state law makes it clear that this conserved water can be transferred. The law on this topic has developed greatly since the Lodi decrees of nearly a century ago, and those policies reflect a strong encouragement of conservation by allowing conserved water to be transferred. Amador and East Bay MUD previously entered into an agreement based on that concept in which East Bay MUD contributed $4.5 million to a project to pipe the main Amador Canal, an earthen canal system from 1870, and conserve water that would be otherwise lost from the canal. The agreement acknowledged an estimate that this would save nearly 5,000 acre-feet a year from losses to the McKelvey River watershed. And for its contribution of funds, the agreement gave East Bay MUD the right to that conserved water. This agreement was very helpful to Amador in completing its project. And the benefits to East Bay Mud were also significant. Over a period of more than 10 years since the project was completed, it provided almost 50,000 acre feet to East Bay Mud at a cost of less than $100 an acre foot. But the agreement sunsetted at the end of 2022. The market for conserved water has developed significantly in the meantime, and Amador Water Agency urgently needs to put this critical asset to its best use. So I wanted to provide that context, and then Director Peters, if she's online, would like to speak to the importance of this asset to the agency.
Thank you for coming all this way to speak. I'll call online again for Director Peters, and I can call again at the end of public comment for the courtesy.
I only have a person online that's Robin Peters, but nobody's hands.
That's her husband, so that's probably her.
Okay.
Okay, if you would like to speak, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom.
Yep, there it is.
Okay.
You should be able to unmute your mic. Robin Peters, you should be able to unmute your mic. There you go.
Hear me?
Yes.
Hi, this is actually Susan Peters. I'm having technical difficulties. You cut off your planning meeting Zoom, and so had to do a workaround here. Anyway, I'm Susan Peters. I'm a board member on the Amador Water Agency's Board of Directors. I represent the Sutter Creek area, but I'm very intimately connected with the entire county. I'm a city planner by profession and education, and I've been working in the county as a planner for over 30 years. So I'm pretty well in tune with what this county needs. The Amador Water Agency serves approximately 25,000 people. We have, which is about 60% of our population. We have 11,000 connections. The rest of our population is predominantly on wells. As you know, with global warming and climate change, our droughts are getting longer and having a more significant impact on those that are using wells. So we anticipate that connection level to go up. The biggest deficiency issues that we're dealing with right now predominantly have to do with our treatment capacity. We have 6 water systems in the water agency's area, 2 of which provide all of the water for the 5 incorporated cities in the county. These areas are high demographic of senior citizens. A lot of people come to retire to Amador County, and they're on fixed income. And then we have pockets of disadvantaged communities within the cities and in the county itself. So our goal is to provide safe, reliable drinking water to these communities. And we are having a difficult time doing that with any level of affordability. Our rates have recently gone up 30%. We are significantly higher than your rates or any other rates in the area. And those numbers are just going to go up because we have significant issues with our infrastructure, the capacity at our plants. Our master plan study that we completed in 2021 showed 98 deficiencies. So we're very close to a catastrophic failure in one or more of our systems, and we really need to work with East Bay Mud in order to be able to transfer water, conserved water, so that we can raise revenue in order to address some of these capacity issues and these reliability issues, and not put it in all on the backs of our customers because they just can't afford that. We've worked successfully with East Bay Med on a lot of issues, including other transfers with the UMRA board and with the voluntary agreements. And we would like to continue to work with you so that we can continue to provide quality drinking water and, do it in an affordable manner to our customers. So if you have any questions for me or our general manager, Mr. McKinney, now or in the future, we would be happy to answer anything.
Thank you for
Thank
your
you for
comment,
the
Director. Thank you for your comment, Director. We have a question here from Director Coleman.
Great, thank you very much, Director Peterson and Larry McKinney for your comments. We enjoyed working with Amador Water on UMRA for a number of years. My question is pretty simple. You have saved water from conservation. Long-term planning needs, have you identified what your water needs are in 20, 30 years? And are you gonna have sufficient water to meet your customers' demands?
Yes, very briefly, the study that Director Peters noted was a 25-year look out, and we had a robust discussion during that, the comments on that study with our community about the planning, the growth projections we were using. And we've tried to actually be a leader in our community in coming up with more rational growth projections. There will be growth in Amador County, but we think it's going to be fairly modest. And we do think that revenue from a transfer like this would not only double our CIP program to allow us to invest in treatment plant capacity and infrastructure, but also in further water conservation.
And what is your long-term CIP program in dollars? Do you have a rough idea?
$500 million,
Okay, thank you.
for our 10,000 connections.
Thank you very much.
Mr. McKinney, do you have a written copy of your comments that you can forward to me, please?
Yes, I can email them to your staff and have it distributed to the board.
Thank you.
We'll move on to the next speaker. I have a speaker card that does not have a name printed on it. To avoid revealing contact information, I'll just identify that this person is, just did not put a name and is a resident of Contra Costa County. Does anybody want to claim that speaker card and come
What's
in
the city?
to speak?
What is the city? Let me look at the handwriting.
It says, it is the same, okay, it is actually the same person who did submit a second speaker card
No,
with the name
I
of Lana
spent-
Coleman.
submitted one, so that must be the one without the name. I apologize.
Okay, do you wish to make a?
No, I'll speak after Lana.
Okay, all right. I will recognize Lana Coleman.
Can't even fill out a simple speaker card. Me?
Yes, they have. And your 3 minutes will start
Good
now.
morning. This is very difficult because I feel there's this wall that directors don't pass in terms of admitting EBMUD makes mistakes. But I'm not going to be able to present all of this here today. The parts I will present are in bold font. You are each presently in violation of your board ethics policy, which requires you to investigate wrongdoings brought to your attention. Today, I'll recap some of the errors should be investigated, including those of Lourdes Matthew, Lisa Serrani, Derek McDonald, and Clifford Chan. Their actions would be a good starting point for an investigation. A fair investigation would strictly exclude all of these individuals from participating, including the selection of an independent external investigator, unbiased, that would define as well the parameters of the investigation. These individuals all have a conflict of interest. There needs to be a third party investigating. All of those listed incorrectly said reciprocity had to be denied by EBMUD because CalPERS denied it. That's number one. Number two, they did not read and understand the ordinance themselves, or they would have known number one was not true. Three, I was told the district was finished discussing that topic with me with an individual who really didn't have that authority. Four, nobody was willing to have a conversation about the district's ethical and moral responsibility to honor promises at all. Five, I was not referred to the retirement board, which is proper procedure. Eight, recent district court filings indicated or included false statements. 10, I was misled by senior managers saying that the court action would answer the question of whether they could legally pay, but instead they just fought it. There was a disconnect between what I understood the purpose of court was going to be and what they did. They said EBMUD couldn't make an exception for a director because they never made an exception for an employee. Former employees Damus and Gilmer say they received exceptions. Do we think they are making it up? I do not. You were misled. Reread my 18-page document from December and decide if you think the briefing of both boards in January was accurate and complete and unbiased. 15, you have not had, to the best of my knowledge, the General Counsel and Human Resources Attorney recuse themselves from working on this. The conflict of interest is so blatant that needs to take place. The district has leveraged attorney-client privileges in a way that seems inappropriate to me. They've made it so not any one person can talk to any other person about all these errors. That would suppress them and keep them buried forever. Lastly, and I'll start wrapping up here, the district seems to be without a moral compass. You think it is okay to wait 3 years and then tell somebody their retirement is off by $1 million. Let employees know what you will do by having a policy. Changing the rules after 3 years is not okay. I will wrap up. The harm caused by the district's widespread negligence and your unwillingness to formally investigate with an external investigator is beyond description. I'm broken. I'm broken. John and I have fought about EBMUD every day for 2.5 years about our unsettled financial future. EBMUD is the mistress in our relationship that John won't give up. None of this would have happened without the negligent incompetence of the district as it was led by your general counsel. Lastly, the following table shows the cumulative value of the financial loss you took away after 3 years. Do you have any questions of me?
Thank you, Mrs. Coleman. The board does take its duties under the ethics policy seriously. I will be communicating with you in writing when it's appropriate for me to do so.
Does anybody have any questions?
Are there any other questions from board members? And I will, the next speaker, I'll call John Coleman as a member of the public.
Thank you. I'm John Coleman, speaking as a member of the public according to the General Counsel letter of January 12th and FPPC writing of yesterday that I received. First, Lana's comments are accurate and true because I've lived them and watched them and seen what's gone on. It has an impact on the retirement. It has had a huge impact on our lives. That's an understatement. I also believe there should be a third-party investigation. I think it should happen with an outside party that has no bias. I don't believe the 7 names that have been mentioned by my wife should be part of anything going on with dialogue or representation or any party to that. And in an ideal world, it would be a situation where the investigator is approved by both EBMUD and my wife, since I'm not party to the suit. After 3 years, this has had, as my wife said, a huge issue. What were to happen if I had just gone to retire, let's say in 4 years, 6 years, whatever the case may be, when economic assumptions are made and then we were told, oh, sorry, we made a mistake. And all of a sudden, everything's been thrown into hell in a handbasket as it is. But it would have been even more so had I not found out, or we had not found out at a sooner time, at a later time. It has had a huge impact on our relationship, and I do believe it needs to be thoroughly investigated by a third-party, independent party doing this, and it should not have the 7 people who have been involved with this, who've been named for irresponsibility, wrong information, and everything else, should not be a party to this at all. We have a responsibility as members of the board to act in the right way. I've been amazed, a little disgusted watching what we have and have not done. It's also, quite frankly, made me look at some of the decisions I've made over the last 30 plus years. Was I really representing the member of the public, member of the staff, or was I just going on what I was told by staff and saying, oh, therefore I was informed by staff, it's right, it's good, it's correct? The answer is no, and I apologize to anybody in the last 30 years where I did not do my responsibility of acting as a board member in the appropriate terms. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Eric Larson.
Good morning, President Katz, board members, and General Shan. My name is Eric Larson. I'm president of AFSCME Local 444. I was the chief negotiator for AFSCME 444 in 2021 contract negotiations team. 2021 contract negotiations were not easy. We were in the thick of working with COVID, and negotiations took place on Zoom. Management were non-responsive to many of our non-economic proposals, having to do with working conditions, such as fatigue time, which an arbitrator directed us to resolve at negotiations. Management moved the proposal only to their liking and then pulled the last best and final offer. Responsive to our protest and your direction, management withdrew the 3 non-economic proposals that were unresolved, leaving the language status quo. We did, however, have tentative agreements on amendments to our article on reassignment, which allows our crews to reassign to new locations through a seniority bidding process by classification when a vacancy occurs. Management had proposed new language providing an annual list of positions required for each work unit. The list was presented as informational, not procedural, and it is a list of positions, not employees. Now, two years, almost 3 years down the road, we find out that management is stopping the reassignment process when the work unit might fall below the minimum prescribed limit, citing a business need, even though they have a reverse seniority mandate procedure. Seniority is an important principle to us, to the union, and reassignment has a big impact on our members due to the very wide service territory of the district. That's why we have negotiated this language at the bargaining table. Unfortunately, there's been a reinterpretation of the contract language, or management was simply deceptive during contract negotiations. This type of behavior violates our trust and tries our relationships with management. Nonetheless, we're working to remedy this concern with senior management, and I hope that I'm not back here in September telling you that we're going to arbitration over this matter. Regarding negotiations, we cannot have our successor negotiations, our successor contract bargained on Zoom or Teams, and we should not have boards of adjustment or mediations or arbitrations on Zoom or Teams. We're out of COVID restrictions, and virtual and remote meetings are not conducive to negotiations. We must have a trustworthy counterpart across the table, and I'm confident that management agrees with this and that the board will assure it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Given that the matter has a lot of depth to it, I would request a memo to the board at the appropriate time. Are there any other questions? Next speaker is Yvette Rivera.
I just want to acknowledge Lana Coleman's talk. I am very sorry for what happened to her and her family, and for John, I'm sorry that this happened to you, for you to understand what we have been going through as employees at the district and what employees continue to go through. But that doesn't mean that you deserve what happened to you, and I'm sorry that that did. I talked this morning about the decision or the judgment that the judge put in for the Pierce Bland case. I talked about how today was going to be a day of transparency, a good day of transparency. I'm going to go back to my copy store after this meeting, and I'm going to provide 2 sets of documents. One is going to be basically updates about the Saji Pierce outcome, Saji Pierce Ariel Bland outcome, the judgment that the judge basically says that there will never be any further proceedings on the deadlock claim, so there's no reason to delay entering the judgment on the non-deadlock claims, which means $8 million There's interest on $8 million accumulating. That package for the trial updates is going to contain this document, the Bernard Alexander closing arguments from the trial that I obtained and paid for, the Derek McDonald testimony that I paid for, and the Donna Jan Duffy testimony. I'm sure you'll find it very helpful when you think about whether or not that trial needs to go any further. And maybe you won't, but I think it's important that you have it. The other package I'm going to give you is the current status of my DEO investigations for my retaliation complaints. I got an email from DIO saying that Ren Noski was chosen. And I provided you guys a document because he has a colorful past. I asked the city of Santa Clara to give me the settlement for a sexual harassment complaint. Please look at that document that you received. I won't be making another copy of it to include in this packet. But it's really important you look at it because DIO chose that lawyer to investigate a small amount of my claims, but he won't be investigating my claims against Derry Moten, Samber Janella Wallace, and David Briggs for the recent retaliatory warning letter I just received. So you may want to find out why that happened, how all of my claims aren't being investigated. The last thing I want to say is I'm going to be including my December tort that has not been closed out and the July 26th tort that I just wrote against David Briggs because I received a warning letter that he couldn't even sign his name to. He had to put David Carlson's name on it. But David Carlson had the foresight to admit that he didn't write it. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. I'll be back with all the documents that I just talked about.
Are there any speakers online further?
No hands online for public comment.
All right, we will now convene to Conference Room 8 to discuss closed session agenda items. We are scheduled to return for the regular meeting at 1:15 p.m. Welcome to the Tuesday, August 8th, 2023 regular business meeting of the EBMUD Board of Directors. We will receive reports from this morning's Planning Committee under item 16. Roll call, Madam Secretary.
Director Chan?
Present.
Director Coleman?
Present.
Director Lenny?
Here.
Director McIntosh?
Here.
Director Patterson?
Present.
Director Young?
Here.
President Katz?
Here. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag.
Flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The board met in closed session this morning pursuant to Government Code Section 54957B1 to consider the public employee evaluations of the district general counsel and general manager with respect to the allegations made by board member John Coleman's spouse, Lana Coleman. Board member John Coleman was recused from participating in this closed session. At the conclusion of this closed session, in response to a request by Director Coleman, Lana Coleman, and the general counsel, the board members present voted to proceed with coordinating a formal investigation related to Mrs. Coleman's allegations. There are no other announcements from closed session. If members of the public are online and wish to speak on agenda or non-agenda items, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. Comments on non-agenda items will be heard now. Comments on agenda items will be heard when the item is up for consideration. Madam Secretary, are there any public comments online?
I have no hands for public comment at this time.
Okay. I will call on speakers that are here, and I will first call on Lana Coleman.
Thank you. And I'll have to change my remarks a little bit in response to that, but I am sensitive to, I don't know if that is in the room, but the experience she's had with the selection of an investigator. So I'll be very interested to hear how that's going to work. You know, I think I just really want the employees to know what this is about. I've said it before, but there are more people here. So what it's about is that John wrote to Alex Coate and said, how do I find out what my retirement will be? Because I was at CalPERS and I East Bay Mud and a lot of years here and there. What's it gonna be? Alex Coate sent us to Lisa Serrani, and she brought Elizabeth Grissetti, who's retired from the district. Elizabeth explained in every single detail with confidence and knowledge how it would work and what our retirement would be. Absolutely. John has 30 years of listening to staff members and believing what they said was accurate. Based on the information of how CalPERS and East Bay Mud were going to work together and how much our retirement would be, I actually retired kind of immediately. It was better than our financial plan had taken into account. I retired. I used some of my money as a down payment on a house in the desert so I could get sun for my seasonal depression. It worked like a miracle. So we upgraded the house there. While we were doing that, the mortgage broker said, let's throw in, you know, John's not in his 40s anymore, let's throw in information on your retirement. So we asked the district to put it in writing. 3 years later, they said, we made a mistake. It's $55,000 a year less than we told you. Instead of $70,000, it's $15,000. I retired, gave up my career. We bought a house that I'm living in the desert. John lives here, and I will not be able to afford it in retirement. Want a lot of used furniture from a nice house. I mean, that's what the district will do to an employee of 33 years and his beneficiary. They sent us to court saying, we won't even talk about the moral or ethical implications of doing that to you. Every employee, whether they're in a union or not in a union, needs to understand that this could happen to you or your family after you die. You cannot believe what they tell you. We did. John has always believed what staff says. And 3 years later, we made a mistake. That's what happened to us. That's why we want an investigation. And I just really think people need to understand what that situation could do. Because it could happen to anybody, let's face it, until you put some policies in place to prevent it. And that's really what I want. I want this to never, ever, ever happen to anybody again, ever. Nothing close to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is John Coleman.
Thank you very much. John Coleman, speaking as a private citizen related to retirement issues here at East Bay Mud. I'm encouraged by what I heard from the announcement from closed session. Thank you. I think what's really important in this process, and I said it this morning, is that if you're going to have an investigation, it should disclude people who've been named by my wife in the process of talking about the errors and judgments that were made over the last several years. It's a conflict of interest. I would hope in the process, and I don't know what's going to happen because I wasn't there, that it would include a third-party investigator agreed upon by, in this case, my wife and the district to go forward. This has been pure hell for me and more so for my wife, to the point where it's put huge strain on our marriage, to put it mildly. And she probably won't like it, but we're going to be separating as a result of this, of what happened with East Bay Mud. I don't want to see, as Lana mentioned, any future employee have to go through this crap, excuse my language, this stuff that we have gone through. It's not fair, nor is it right, quite frankly. When you make a statement and then 3 years later you say you made a mistake, that's morally wrong. And probably part of the problem for me, I tend to believe things when I'm told them. That's part of my condition with autism. Autistic people tend to believe what they're told. So I'm now really turning it on the table, what the heck do I believe and what do I not believe anymore when we get staff reports? And then you have to ask a specific question, and even then, you don't get an answer. And that is disconcerting for not only me, but I suspect anybody else who comes up here with questions and comments wanting to know what's going on, whether they be an employee or a member of the public. Thank you, thank you for what action you took in closed session. I don't know the details of what's going to happen or how it's going to happen, but I thank you for that, and I just hope it's done in a fair manner to all parties concerned. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Yvette Rivera.
As promised, I provided the board and the district secretary 3 packets. One, the Saji Pierce Ariel Bland update, which includes the judgment entered. And I read from the judgment the last line, and I'll read it again. After they were awarded approximately $8 million, the court said that because there may never be any further proceedings on the deadlock claims, there is no just reason to delay entering the judgment on the non-deadlock claims. That means, from my understanding, that interest begins to accrue once the judgment is made. I provided this board documents that I bought from the court, testimony from Derek McDonald, from Donna Jan Duffy. She was the subject matter expert on how investigations are conducted, and she also created that list that referenced this board's failures. And the last document in this packet is Bernard Alexander. Now, he's a civil rights attorney. I think he's pretty well known in the United States. Anyway, he has a closing argument for the Pierce Bland case. And I don't know what the district's going to do, but I think it's in the best interest of the ratepayers and the district that this board of directors reads that. So that's the first packet. I did provide a copy of one of the cases that you had on the closed board agenda. It's Renato Zafra, his civil rights lawsuit. I provided you his first amended complaint. There's going to be a hearing coming up on, I think it's August the 15th. Then, the most important document that I gave you is the status of the DIO investigations related to my retaliation complaints. I received a disturbing email the other day from a DIO rep saying that the scope of my retaliation complaints is going to be confined to several complaints, but my complaints against her manager and the director of her department aren't going to be investigated at this point. This packet also contains the June 22nd, 2022 email from Derry Moten telling me that the GM, General Manager Chan, will be contacting me soon about my retaliation complaints against Mr. Moten and Janella Samber Wallace. In this packet, I included the December tort, the recent July 26th tort against David Briggs for giving me a retaliatory warning letter for unsubstantiated claims. I'll rest there and I'll continue reading from these documents at future board meetings. Thank you, I yield.
Thank you. We move to the consent calendar. I do have a public comment on agenda item number 5. Are there any other comments from the public on consent calendar items other than agenda item number 5? Okay. Yes, any other requests for removal of an item from the board?
I'd like item 6 removed, please.
14 for me, please.
Okay, is there a motion to adopt the consent calendar items 1 through 4 and 7 through 13? Moved by Director Patterson, seconded by Director Young. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstained, the motion carries. Item number 5, while Mr. Larson is coming up, if we can just have a brief introduction from staff.
This contract is for the FMO, the fully maintained and operated dump truck services contract that we bring annually to the district and that we review the spending, I believe quarterly with Local 444. But I'm not quite sure what Mr. Larson would like to comment on.
Thanks, Eric Larson.
Thank you. Good afternoon, President Katz, board members, and General Manager Chan. We do have a negotiated agreement with management to add 5 additional heavy transport operators over the next year to reduce the district's reliance on fully maintained and operated dump trucks. I did want to point out that the district's cost to contract out dump truck services continue to rise from $3 million in 2019 to $3.7 million in 2020 and 21 to $4.9 million in 2022 to current request for $5.9 million in 2023. We do have an agreement with management to add positions, so we are not opposing this contract, but I do want to bring to your attention the continued escalation of costs. Thank you.
Thank you. And yeah, my understanding was that our budget does allow us to reduce the need for these services, but that budget was just adopted just over a month ago, so the benefits may be seen later in this budget cycle.
I'll move the item.
Moved by Director Coleman. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Chan. Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstained, the motion carries. Item number 6.
Yeah, thank you for points. I'm in full support of goats getting rid of our weeds and vegetation. If we didn't have to use chemicals, goats are the first choice, and then people from the Corps, East Bay Corps, or whomever doing that as well. My question is on the amount of dollars to do 277 acres a year. That's what it says in the report, that the vegetation, reduce fire hazards up 277 acres on district property seems high. So can that be explained to me why it's a contract of almost 2.8 million, and the amount of acreage we have abated by goats isn't that much?
Yeah, I see Tony Montano is here. Maybe he can respond to some of those questions about how much our contract has and the amount of vegetation management we've had to do has been increasing over the years.
Afternoon, Board. Director Chen. So the bottom line is the goats are in demand. That's really what it's about. We typically do somewhere between $60,000 and $80,000 a year in the past. We've been doing it for about 23 years. This year what we did is we actually went out to 3 vendors. We only got 2 to respond, and we laid out our properties, and they came back with prices for that so that we can lock them in as we go forward. But there's only a couple organizations that do this.
I should be renting goats.
Well, and the other thing too that's occurred is the prevailing wages now take effect for the herders.
Okay.
So there are some increased costs and there's increased demand. And as you mentioned, it's better to do goats than it is to spray chemicals. So that's where we're going with this, and that's the increase. This also gives us some room to add additional vendors should we need to do that.
So is the nearly 2.8 million for 1 year or 2 years?
That actually is a total of 5-year cost.
Okay, 5 years. Okay, that's a bit more reasonable. And are the goats being paid prevailing wage?
You're the second person that's asked that question. It's the herders.
Okay, all you can eat, poison oak, trees, garbage cans, whatever, okay.
We do also allow, because we don't just say goats, it could also be sheep, but generally it's goats.
Okay, I thank you for clarifying that for me, Tony. I'll move the item.
Maybe just for clarity, because I may have misstated, has the amount of vegetation management that we've been using for goats been increasing over the years or has been steady?
Oh, no, it's been increasing. 277 acres is aggressive.
Okay.
For our standard.
So
we're increasing it a lot.
How much does it take for an acre, a herd of goats? How long does it take a herd of goats to clear an acre off?
That sounds like a joke.
It is not a joke.
The prelude to a joke.
No, no.
Exact answer, but they typically stay at sites for a couple weeks.
Okay.
Well, I stand firmly in support of child labor protections, but I think the goats have a valid reason to be there.
And sheep.
Right. Dog herder sheep, whatever. Okay, I've moved the item.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Moved by Director Coleman. Is there a second? Second. Seconded by Director Patterson. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Item number 14, Director Chan.
Hi. Thank you so much, Mr. President. Kat, can you come up here, please? So Kat has agreed, much to my relief, to be my standby officer. Director Coleman was on my case a few weeks ago, if you remember, and so I'm just so proud to have Kat as my standby officer. She really is an extraordinary leader, a shining star in her community. Besides that, she has just such impressive qualifications. She has been working as an attorney in multiple municipalities for decades, for years. So can you say something about your professional background for the fun of it?
Yes, I can. Well, public sector was where I wanted to be, and so for my entire legal career, I've worked for different public agencies, starting with AC Transit and then going to various municipalities. So that's where I felt like I could give the most service, just like you. And I did want to say that I was very honored that April asked me to be an alternate. Very flattered, very honored. But my hope is that I will never have to serve in that capacity. I want her to do her job. She is excellent at it. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kat. I'm just so proud to call you a friend.
Would you like to make the motion?
Yes. So, okay. My motion is to appoint Kat Wellman as a standby officer, actually standby officer, position number 1 for Ward 7.
Second that.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstained? The motion carries. We will now move to determination and discussion under item number 15. We have 3 items for presentation by the general manager.
Yeah, first we have Laura Sang, our Senior Human Resources Analyst here, who will share with you a brief presentation recognizing the employees who have reached service award milestones between 5 and 35 years in the last quarter. Laura?
Thank you, Clifford. So before we get into the PowerPoint, I just wanted to take a moment because I feel like this is a great way to celebrate. We have some recipients who are here today, and I'm going to read their names and they're going to stand up, and I just want to invite everyone to give them an applause to recognize their years of service. So for 25 years of service, we have Diane Mao. Also for 25 years, we have Leo Cinco. And Leslie Richardson for 25 years. Thank you so much. And we also have 2 other employees who are recognizing for 20 years of service. And we have Paula Valle. And we have Alejandro Joaquin. So I feel really privileged that part of my job here at the district is to recognize employees and for the work and the contributions they've made for the district. And I want you to see all the names and the years of service of all the employees who are being recognized on this PowerPoint. I know not everyone could be here today. It would be really great maybe if we think about a way to celebrate everyone's accomplishments in a more personal and meaningful way, that would be wonderful. And this is just our start of getting back together to celebrate all of the great people that we have. And we're going to start inviting people to these board meetings more often. So I just want to thank you for giving that time to recognize everyone. Are there any questions about our recognition program or any of the names that we're sharing?
I would just like to say thank you.
Yeah, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Next, we have Derry Moten, our Director of the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Culture, who will share with you who will share with you our plans to expand our Title VI program to meet the requirements set forth by the U.S. EPA.
Good afternoon, board members. Would like to begin with a little defining of our Title VI program. As a federal contractor, one of the requirements that the district has is to have a Title VI program, which is from Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. Most people are familiar with Title VII, which is where we get our EEO, affirmative action laws from. Title VI is regarding public access. And so what we're doing today is talk a little bit about the program, talk about our program implementation and next steps. So to begin with, the United States Environmental Protection Agency, as a contractor, we, as a district, recently received a grant to work on Upper San Leandro Reservoir. So within that grant, there is a requirement that we continue to look at their specific guidelines around Title VI. We have been a federal contractor for many years, and we have naturally complied with general Title VI requirements. The EPA has some additional requirements that they have kind of integrated into their programming, which is what this enhancement to our program is currently about. We have to provide our compliance with that for them by September 5th. And again, Title VI requirements include compliance with the overall Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, and then 2 presidential executive orders. Those executive orders are number 1, Executive Order 12898, which is around federal actions to address environmental justice in minority populations and low-income populations. That was signed into existence in 1994. And then we have Executive Order 13166, which was signed in 2000, which is about improving access to services for individuals with limited English proficiency. So our Title VI program is enhanced with how we're, number 1, looking at this item of environmental justice, and then number 2, our limited English proficiency, and that breaks into 2 layers that we'll talk about. So for the EPA, the defining of environmental justice is about equal and fair, meaningful access and involvement of people regardless of race, color, national origin, or income. And that comes into play with respect to development, implementation, enforcement of general environmental laws, regulations, policies, but it also has to do with general public access to our resource. So the goal in general is to be achieved when everyone enjoys a couple of things, that everyone has equal degree of protection from environmental health hazards, and number 2, everyone has equal access to the decision-making processes to have healthy environments to live, learn, and work. So the EPA guidelines specifically call for us to increase emphasis on our linkage between Title VI and environmental justice as they have defined, which really gets into our public participation processes and access. And then also to ensure non-discrimination public access to district programs, activities, services through the adoption of a comprehensive non-discrimination policy. And as I mentioned, we have existing policies for non-discrimination around Title VII and in other areas, but we want to specifically be able to address this around Title VI. And again, the possibility of then making that a comprehensive policy around non-discrimination for access.
Derry, give us one moment. The presentation is not showing in Zoom, so we're going to stop sharing and share again. Can you do that, please? That's not coming up.
Sure.
Okay, Terry.
Okay. So the next item within the EPA guidelines is to ensure that historically marginalized communities have meaningful access to district programs, activities, and services through enhancements to our overall public participation plan, which includes adoption of formal language access plan to support meaningful participation for individuals with limited English proficiency, and also a disability access plan to ensure meaningful public access and participation with individuals with disabilities. The other thing is to provide public notice to districts of the district's non-discrimination policy and a formal procedure for how we're going to report or field any kind of grievances or complaints of any kind of discriminatory action, which is beyond Title VII. And then also ensuring timely, fair, and impartial investigation of any grievance or complaint with the goal of remedying any situations that occur that we have reported to us. So in terms of the planning, the three core plans that fit into the overall enhancement of our Title VI program, which is number one, a public participation plan, language access plan, and then the disability access plan. In each case, we're working with cross-functional employee groups to evaluate our existing program and to provide some form of potential updates as we're working on these. Again, our equity core teams are working on public participation and language assistance plans. In both cases, these were items that we had in the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Strategic Plan, so those groups are continuing to take a look at those items. And then our Disability Access Plan, we've developed a cross-functional working group composed of 4 different departments and then one of our employee affinity groups to participate in the development of that plan. Yes.
Real quick question on the public participation. The equity core teams and groups, they are already established except for the disability access, correct?
Yes.
So those are already currently employees of, what happens if somebody else wants to participate as an employee of one of these groups? Can they?
Yes. Two layers to this is our first level had been to work toward getting our EPA compliance down, but in each of these cases, and we'll present a little bit later in the plan, is how we want to continue to do continuous improvement to these groups. And again, all employees who are interested in participating in those can definitely participate.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So again, we defined environmental justice, again, fair and meaningful involvement of people regardless of race, color, national origin, income, respect to the development of plans and enforcement of laws, legal regulations or policy. In 2022, we started an environmental justice steering committee, which is comprised of district employees. That committee then began with just starting to look at kind of how we're kind of looking at the subject of environmental justice. They will continue to be the kind of body that then looks at Title VI in the long term and how we begin to work on compliance overall. So within public participation, our capital improvements pilot project team has been working on kind of pulling together information, looking at our existing public participation processes. The EPA process recommends that you take a graduated process known as kind of a spectrum of public participation. And in that spectrum, looking at specific issues around project scope and size, looking at potential impacts to a community, and then evaluation of the existing demographics of any impacted community, and look at what is the appropriate and have a mechanism for identifying the appropriate level of engagement with those communities. There's kind of a general 5-step framework that was being used specifically to look at this, and so the team is actually doing the cultivation of the planning regarding that. And again, our first level is to kind of identify and align our existing approaches. And most of our approaches we're currently using with CEQA align very, very much with this, but then taking this kind of looking at are there any gaps that will allow us to continue to improve on this and look at ways we can appropriately involve communities as we're working with them. So next is a language access plan, and what the EPA requires and recommends is that every entity that is in the development of a language access plan use a 4-factor analysis to be able to identify again, what's the appropriate levels and right types of resources. That four-factor analysis, as we've been using it, aligns with a lot of work that we've currently been doing. So the district does have layers of language access supports that we have in place. So again, pulling those together, looking at the four-factor analysis and identifying, are there any enhancements we want to do to our existing outreach and our existing processes in terms of language assistance? And in many ways, formalizing these into a plan that, again, fits into what many would see as a kind of a general overall language access plan.
The captions are over, I think it says team develop, okay.
Yes.
So, just ironically, one should know, the EPA only accepts public comments on regulations in English and Spanish. So, just, hopefully they're taking their own look at that. But, I mean, where are we, how far away do you think we actually are in providing true language access? And I mean, are we doing interpretation when we do public meetings in areas that are predominantly or, you know, where we know there are monolingual speakers? Are we, I mean, our website still doesn't have a translation widget on it. I mean,
Yes.
what's on the top of
On the top of
the
list
list?
here,
Yeah.
The top of the list here is really our PIO group has actually done some significant hires in terms of bringing on staff who are multilingual, so they're continuing to kind of cultivate that. One of the team members, Mona, will be working with us to help continue to cultivate this. Our big opportunity that we really want to take advantage of is, as we're developing this, is to really identify, again, that as a gap, and then how do we want to address that gap. So right now we have kind of lists of of our employees who are bilingual that can be contacted to do different work, but we do have to do enhancements to our existing program to make sure that those employees are in the places where we need them. So when someone's doing a public meeting, part of the adapted guidelines want to be that if we begin to promote these in our kind of our core languages, that we can then identify on those as well. As somebody wants to request additional assistance, that we can make that assistance available. So that's kind of step one. And again, we want to continue after we get to the point where we are EPA compliant. We do want to continue to have the groups continue to work and move forward to, again, can enhance where we see that we have more opportunities, because we don't want to settle with just kind of being compliant with this. We want to continue to cultivate ways to advance this. For our website, our ISD group has been meeting with the team and having the conversations and doing reviews of possible widgets. And so there is kind of a plan and process in terms of moving forward with that. But what we didn't want to do was, and part of the conversation has been, is to put kind of a generic widget there that does not do adequate translations, and make sure that we actually have a very viable mechanism in place to use.
So the comment I would make there, working with the state's largest union of speakers of other languages who contend with 13 languages that they provide language access support to. They strongly believe that perfect is the enemy of the good, and that you know, speakers of other languages are used to crappy translation, and that some is better than none, or, you know, pretty good is you know, good enough on the road, and that it's an iterative process, and with AI is getting better, you know, all the time, for you know, the website part. So I would just caution that, you know, getting to something that's going to provide adequate translation in all the languages that we want to provide translation into might be really good in a couple, and then terrible, and then you don't do any of it. So I would just say, you know, make the road by walking it.
Thank you.
And I'll just add, I mean, that's the discussion that we've had. You know, we're not trying to make the perfect translation, but we do want to test out the widgets to see how they work. We know it's not going to be perfect, and we'll probably put it out there when it's not perfect.
Right, we already know Zoom isn't perfect, just even for capturing what we say.
Yeah, but thank you for the feedback, yes. So the Disability Access Plan, again, we brought together kind of a cross-functional group from engineering, HR, Office of Diversity, Equity, and Culture, OGC, ISD, and our affinity group, DART. So the conversations we've been having and the plan that we've been working on is really looking at, again, the issue of physical accommodations, which we kind of have with ADA, but then looking at what are the steps beyond that. Looking at visual and auditory support for things like the board meetings or the types of things can we have access and support for that. And then digital accessibility, which gets back into the issues with the website and how we want to continue to cultivate that and other forms of digital accessibility for documents. So the other large item that we are putting into place is that we have not necessarily for the district had a central place for managing Title VI complaints. So we have really fielded those. Customer and Community Services has really taken the majority of those external calls when they come in. So we want to have, again, an additional process that then looks at and complies with EPA's requirement to have a dedicated compliance coordinator as a central point of contact for any types of grievances or complaints. Naturally, then to ensure fair, timely, and impartial investigations, and then I have an emphasis on bringing issues to full resolution, or bringing any types of other mitigation of impacts or remedying of situations based on what complaints are received.
Harry, real quick on that, I'm surprised you didn't have something, but neither here nor there. Is it going to come to your office?
Yes, right now that's kind of first step.
Okay, and do you have adequate resources to do this?
We are moving resources around right now to do that. And long term, we want to see what kind of responses we begin getting. And as we see that there's a higher volume, we definitely will call out that there are additional resources required.
Thank you.
So our implementation, and again, mentioned as was kind of referenced before, we want to treat this in 3 phases. Phase 1 is really by September 5th, having our program really aligned with the EPA's guidelines, make sure that we're fully in compliance with them. Stage 2 is conducting an annual program evaluation with the anticipation or the initiation of best practices around some of these items. So again, when we get to things like the website, we get to other areas where we look at how we're kind of coming to level with certain things, and then how can we continue to advance. So for the first 3 years of the program, we want to continue to do that in terms of an annual evaluation. And phase 3, we want to get to where we're not only getting to best practices, but we're trying to lead. We're trying to look at ways we can be kind of a front runner in terms of what we're doing and how we're actually engaging our community. Being naturally in a place that's one of the most diverse places in the country, we want to make sure that we are also really taking every step that we can to make sure that every individual in this community has access to both our services and our decision-making processes. And then next steps for your consideration, we will be bringing back kind of the opportunity to review the documentation that we've put together so far. For submission, we'll be submitting everything to the EPA. They have basically a self-certification that we'll be submitting to them on September 5th. And then we'll begin implementation of the updated program as we're going forward. And the last thing is continue to look at opportunities for training of staff. Specifically, again, how to use resources, how to continue to make sure that when we engage, that we're engaging people in the community in ways that, again, continue to encourage their participation overall.
Okay, we'll move into discussion and questions.
Thank you, Derry. I think this is great that we're finally moving in this direction. Could you also provide in a memo for the 3 affinity groups, if you want to call them that, who the participants are, just so I have an idea who on staff is involved with this process?
Yes.
Thank you.
I have some comments, and I'll just run through them fairly quickly because we do have a little bit of some activities planned after the board meeting today. So I'm I'm really glad to see that we're doing this. Obviously, we have to because we're a federal contractor, but I do see that we have all of the essential elements for compliance. My academic training and some of my early professional advocacy was in the transportation field, where Title VI is very developed and is often contentious. Here we, I think, are in a very good position to be implementing because all of our customers receive high-quality water. We don't have meaningful variances in the water quality that our East Bay customers receive. So I think that would be the primary area to be, looking at. But we do have a legacy of circumstances, the siting of the wastewater treatment plant and odors that impact surrounding communities. We definitely would have some potential things to look at. Most of Title VI is looking at new decisions that the agency is making. And for that reason, I think a lot of the emphasis on implementing Title VI, I haven't read the regulations that EPA has, but if they're anything like the ones that DOT has for transportation, the best practices tend to look back to in the CEQA process or the NEPA process, really looking at the scoping and how public participation with scoping works, which I see reflected here. The quality of an alternatives analysis and getting the alternatives analysis right is very critical to staying in compliance with Title VI. So I think paying attention to that would be important for compliance. I think we're on the right track to have a compliant document submitted to EPA, but I think it would be good to invest some time with the board, maybe visiting a committee in the process, and with the public to develop some feedback about environmental justice issues. I don't think that needs to hold up our submission to EPA. I think we should proceed with that to stay in compliance. But I think having some opportunity to hear from the public about environmental justice would be in an appropriate format when the staff is ready to do it in a meaningful way. I think that would be a good thing to do as part of this program. And I'm making a general comment that I don't see that reflected here. That's not a knock on compliance because that's really beyond compliance. But I think that keeps up with the spirit of our goals is to take public input on that. One other comment about public participation, particularly when it gets to engaging the public and language access. And the transportation field has relied a lot on outside contractors to be able to get the cultural competency, the language access competency, and also local community competencies. I like that we are trying as best as we can to build that in-house, and I think that's the best way to have sustainability with the quality of the outreach. But contractors do seem to be a necessity of the way things work in transportation, and I think we should just be aware that that's what they've learned. On the other side, if you talk with folks at transportation agencies who administer Title VI or who criticize Title VI implementation, there are a lot of pitfalls with managing contractors who do outreach. I think it would be very important before we go solicit and hire just, from a very limited set of information or limited resumes, limited roster of experience perhaps, that we just be aware of lessons learned from peer agencies, not necessarily just in water, but in transportation in our region, because they've had those lessons learned about where do their contractors succeed and where do those contractors fall short or, could be seen as mismanaging public resources. So inadvertently. So I think it would be helpful to learn from that as we're striving for high compliance with Title VI. Last two comments that I would raise is, two questions really. Is there any particular role for tribal consultation, or is that mostly handled through our UMRA JPA, or does that play any direct role with this program here? And my second question is, does this plan need to be circulated, or is that something that, yeah, what's the public process for this initial submission?
Yeah, to begin with the tribal items, we have had 3 employees who recently went through a 9-month program with Right Relations to specifically cultivate relationships with local tribal entities here. Mike Tognolini has been very, very well, deeply connected with that, especially with work that we've already been doing with, specifically with outreaches with our rangers and naturalists in certain areas. However, with that, we also want to continue to try to make sure that this also becomes inclusive of that. Mike is also part of the Environmental Justice Steering Committee, so his voice specifically on that area of how we engage tribal communities will be really critical to how we move forward. We haven't called it out specifically in the documentation, but it's definitely an item that we have on our radar and want to make sure that we're complying with. Then in terms of completion of the plan and actually going for circulation, part of it is one of the things that we do want to do is we do have to continue to make sure that we're getting that information out. So we will be, once the plan is complete, we will have versions of the plan that can be publicly circulated. And we'll try to work with our public information office to see how we can continue to make sure that that gets out to the full public. We also have a requirement to make sure that we have some items specifically on our website that make both the plan and the non-discrimination statements available to people so that people know specifically how to file complaints if those arise. So.
Excellent, thank you. Okay. Do you need action today, or is this for feedback before we consider it next
This
meeting?
was just for feedback before we'll have the final plan submitted to you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Derry. Last presentation, so you might recall on July 29th, about 1,200 employees, retirees, and their families participate in our Centennial picnic at Lafayette Reservoir. We want to share with you a few photos from the event and also acknowledge the many employees and retirees who helped organize the event. We have Kelly Zito here to run through the presentation.
Thank you, Clifford. Good afternoon, President Katz and members of the board. As Clifford mentioned, we had a great day for our Centennial employee and retiree picnic on July 29th. The weather cooperated. It wasn't too hot. We had a lot of activities out there, games, prizes. We had a 3D video booth, which I somehow missed. And we had a lot of just great energy out there. I think the attendance was about 1,200 people, as Clifford said. So I'm just going to click through a few slides here. Let's see. I just wanted to mention, as we're perusing some of these photos, that if you didn't get a chance to see it on that day, there are some new kiosks out at Lafayette under some pergolas that we developed from an old redwood tank. And so the pergolas are out there, and we have some nice new kind of panels out there detailing the history of the area, the history of the reservoir, the watershed, wildlife, and other items. So here's just a little sampling. I have to say that the water toss was the bane of my existence by the end of the day, because I was so
And maybe the most dangerous also.
It was,
you happen to be walking by.
got a little tense, but it was a lot of fun. Let's see. Yeah, we had music, face painting, and volunteers were out there with their T-shirts. There was the mega intensity of the cupcake table, which a few of us participated in. It was a stressful job. And so, you know, and here's a nice photo, employee photo of folks who gathered at the stage for some professional shots there. The main thing that we wanted to do was thank the UDEA and the other folks that were the committee who created this. And this was a big lift. It was kind of a sprint to the finish, and everyone did an amazing job. So here are the folks on the committee, and here are that text is over, but these are the event volunteers. I think there are 60 total that we had. So a couple pages of these. Tug of war. Keeps going. I've only got 10 more of these. I'm just kidding. Okay, I'm last. I'm always last. I always know when I see my name. It's last.
So the next one is scheduled for 100 years from now?
21, 23. Yeah.
What a great event.
It was a great event. On behalf of my granddaughter, I thank you heartily.
I see Director Patterson is wearing his commemorative medal, which is really nice, that employees got, so, yeah.
Yeah, it's great fun.
Thank you.
Good food, too.
Definitely want to
Reverend
thank
Jones, yes, thank you very
all
much.
the staff and all the retirees and everybody who participated or helped make this event happen. It wouldn't have happened without everybody, so thank you.
All right, thanks.
We will now move to.
I wasn't able to participate. It looks great. Everything I heard was phenomenal about it. But I was at UMRA the day before, and I went up the hill, and on Saturday, I actually went into my summer camp that's closed this year every year since 1969. And so that's what I was doing over the weekend. I'd have been dead tired if I'd came back on Friday, though, to do this on Saturday.
Okay, and then attached is the monthly report, and at your places is a speakers bureau and outreach. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
We'll now move to reports and director comments. Under committee reports, the minutes from the July 11th Planning Committee and Legislative Human Resources Committee were included in the agenda materials. We will now receive an update from this morning's Planning Committee. Director Linney.
Real quick, we still are using Twitter. I know it's a social platform. X now, you get the X email. It says formerly Twitter. And we have an Instagram account, I see. Are we looking at migrating over to Meta's new platform that essentially does similar to Twitter? I'm saying that because I'm not a big fan of, I guess, Mr. Elon Musk.
Thread, I guess, is.
Thread, yes.
Facebook's, not this time, but we will continue to evaluate the platforms that I think will give us the best reach to our
I
customers.
think they have over 2 million followers in the first week.
Yeah, I think that reduced by maybe half after the kind of the initial intrigue.
All right, the planning committee met this morning. We got 3 reports. One was the readiness report on emergency planning and earthquake preparedness, as well as the final report or the vestiges of the COVID pandemic response. Also, PSPS shutoffs, update on that. It was a good report. The second report was on regulatory compliance, reported on the SSO incident at Alice Street, a digester gas release, and also the Lancha Plana pond embankment collapse. These are all things that we're learning lessons from and fixing. And then a report also on workplace health and safety as part of that report. Finally, we had a long session on the PLA, discussion of negotiating a PLA, project labor agreement. I would just say that it was we had public comment from both the unions, building trades unions, as well as from the independent contractors. We had a very robust discussion among the board and a chance to ask staff quite a number of questions and gave instructions for the staff to try to see if we can get a negotiated PLA that's not just for one project, but also for a limited period of time, but for all projects over a certain amount of size, certain size.
Thank you, Director Linney. We have other items for future consideration. Please submit items for future consideration to the general manager. And that takes us to director comments. Thank you if you have already submitted your written comments to the secretary. Are there any verbal director comments or reports?
I have verbal director comments. Just to let everyone know, there was a constituent that approached me a few months ago with some concerns. And he wrote a protest letter to the board of the increase in rates. And so I submitted that letter to the auditor, our internal auditor, who I think did a fantastic job. And so we actually received the outcome of the audit. I know Clifford and I had a very good talk about it yesterday. And he will be working with President Katz to get it on the agenda. But the gist of, I think, his concern has to do with board authorization and money transfers. So money's being transferred from project to project, and just for, he says, 2023 is 290 million. So that was in the report. I know Clifford and I spoke about it. He had some ideas about some changes that he would like to see. And that is actually, I'm hoping that he can work with President Katz to get that on the agenda. But that is a lot of money that's going from project to project that the council has no idea about it. The directors have no idea about it. And so since we're responsible for the finances and the fiscal health of East Bay MUD, that is something I think that we need to correct. It has to be more visible. The money transfers in our fiscal situation has to be more visible. So also, I think I brought up a couple of months ago, the idea of doing training for the board. And so I think this is one thing that would be ideal, one situation where maybe we could have the California Special Districts Association come in and talk to the board about overseeing fiscal projects relative to, or our fiscal situation relative to capital projects and infrastructure. I mean, it is a lot of money, and I feel like I at least would benefit from extra training, especially in relationship to the audit. So thank you so much.
Yeah,
That's
and maybe quickly, Director Chan, I mean, I heard a couple of things. One was the training. The other thing that you brought up, and I heard support from other board members, was to have a board retreat. And that's something that we'll be bringing to the board coming up at an upcoming board meeting to talk about a retreat and topics that might be covered.
Okay, thank you.
Director Patterson?
Yes. I wanted to briefly report to the board that on the 1st of August, I was invited to what they call Operation Rebuild. It's really the Oakland Unified School District's construction at the McClymonds High School site. And because I have shared in the history of the Alumni Association, I was invited to participate in a gathering of all of the various trades, architect, everything to do with the McClymonds, what they called rebuild. It's actually capital improvement, and it's the replacement of the high school building. And they're trying to chart a path forward. After 3 attempts, this time they hope to get the whole thing moving. And they called on some of my historical perspective related to it and ability to link with outside funding support if where possible, since it really attracts everything that's on the table now, including the federal rebuild and what they call environmental justice pursuit, as well as the state. And they're going after all of those because they've identified all the categories, the amount of funding in the most recent bond measure, the shortfalls, and they're trying to provide linkages to shore up everywhere there's a shortfall so that the project will go all the way. It was interesting as we recap today in the history of East Bay MUD, 100 years. McClymonds High School was 100 years 3 years ago. And so that's one of the things that we look at now in terms of our infrastructure and our emphasis on it. Oakland schools haven't done a very good job, and there are examples in that structure of piping that isn't up to grade, and the exposure possibly that it gives to children who are in attendance. These are not the things they're trying to emphasize, but to link into this time to go all the way and do everything that's needed, and they're projecting that to move forward in 2025 or late 2024. So I just wanted to report out to you. It seems like I'm back in the community because everybody's calling. Today, at the end of the meeting, I also have an injection to make regarding one of Oakland's heritage leadership in the Scotland family, but that'll come at the end.
Yeah, we have one more, or at least one more director comment before we adjourn. Director Coleman?
I'll make it very quick. I did provide written comments. I will not be at the meeting on the 22nd of August. If you see me on video, I'll be in bed, and I'll have a cow hat on. But if I look like hell and feel like hell, I'm not going to be joining the meeting.
And I would add, I will also not be at the August 22nd meeting, but I'm not having surgery. I'm taking a kind of a once-in-a-lifetime trip to India and Nepal, and I will be unable to join remotely because at that day, I think I will be deep in a gorge on the Zanskar River, so sorry to miss it.
Okay. Any further director comments? Seeing none, we will move to remarks and adjournment. Adjournment in memory. Director Patterson?
Yes. Today is my honor to bring forward to EBMUD in memory of a life well lived in Laura Marie Scotland. And Laura is one of 5 daughters and 2 sons born to George and Christine Scotland. Her father, the Oakland Convention Center, is the George P. Scotland Memorial, named for him, who was a community leader, outstanding, serving on the Coliseum Commission, the Oakland Parks and Recreation Commission, and the mother served on the Port Commission. Laura had multiple sclerosis, and she devoted the latter part of her life to fundraising for that cause throughout Oakland and leading a group in that regard. She could not walk, was confined to wheelchair, but her vocal ability was there, and she continued to provide leadership like her father. And because that family held high esteem in the Catholic community, the bishop and all of the upper tier persons in the Catholic community, and then a great turnout was there at St. Columba near Alcatraz and San Pablo in Oakland. Laura's life was one of giving, directing, and assisting others, some who had the malady and some who just got spiritual guidance. And I would like to close today's meeting asking the board to adjourn in Laura Scotland's memory.
Thank you, Director Patterson. And with that adjournment in memory, the next regular meeting of the board will be held Tuesday, August 22nd, 2023 at 1:15 PM. This meeting is now adjourned.